Good morning. It's exactly 7:41 at News Talk 99.7, WNTK, WNTK.com, News Talk 98.9, and 1490 WUPR. John Harper, Jim McKay on this Monday morning, March 5th, 2012. Steve Kenda has lived here in New Hampshire for a number of years. He is a businessman. He actually took literally a dollar in a dream and built his company into a multi-million-dollar a year business, and now he would like to run the state of New Hampshire. He is considering a run to be New Hampshire's next Republican governor, and joins us in studio this morning at WNTK and WUVR. Steve, good morning. Welcome to WNTK. How are you?
Yes, good morning, John and Jim. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you on. It really is a rags to riches story. Tell us a little bit about your background, Steve.
Sure. I grew up pretty poor down in Brooklyn, and had a good math teacher suggested I apply to a school up in Boston, which I did. And after graduation, came across the border, settled up in Hollis, New Hampshire for a few years, and managed to pull together a couple credit cards and get a business off the ground, a one-man consulting shop that over time grew to 18 offices across 9 time zones.
Steve is being very modest. That little school in Boston was MIT, and he went there on a scholarship. And I love the fact that your dad gave you $100, and that was really almost the start to your life when he pointed you in the direction of Cambridge.
Well, I had 4 younger sisters, and that's what the family could afford at the time.
Wow. Yeah. So why would you now you built the company into a very large company, a very successful company. Why do you want to be the governor?
I think at this point in time, given the state of the economy, what the corner office needs after 4 terms with John Litch is someone with business experience. I think my 2 announced competitors, Kevin and Ovid, are both good people. I think they'd make fine governors. I just happen to think I'd make a better one. I'd be happy to work with the legislature on finding ways to make the state a more business friendly environment. Right now, we're not ranked very well in terms of business friendliness. Our tax situation is actually very good. The tax foundation, because of the retail and income tax, the lack of there, actually ranks us fairly highly. But from a business tax perspective, it's really ranked very poorly. Our corporate taxes are ranked number 46th. Our unemployment insurance costs at 39th. The workers' comp costs at 46th. So it's a challenging situation. The way the taxes are structured here between the business profits taxes, the business enterprise tax. The business enterprise tax means I can't get a venture capitalist up here to bring 50 to 100 person payroll up here and lose money for a couple of years. I mean, I would have loved to have had, given our BET, Barack Obama have that Solyndra fiasco up here. I mean, it would have been great to see $500 million of our taxpayer money lost in New Hampshire, given the BET.
And it's a double-edged sword, isn't it, Steve? Because if you make New Hampshire a more business-friendly environment, a lot of those fees that channel into the state budget go away. How do you make up that money?
Which fees were you suggesting?
Well, the business enterprise tax. A lot of the fees we hear from small business people like you who started a small business and are trying to grow it, and they say, we're just being choked with paperwork and all of these fees. We always seem to be writing these checks to the state of New Hampshire, which add up at the end of the year. So if you get some of those obstacles out of the way in growing a small business, where do you make up that revenue?
Oh, correct. I mean, for 30 years, I've been building jobs along the Salem, Londonderry corridor here, and I tell you, the first 15 years were a lot easier than the last 15. I've been dealing with Concord regulations and taxes for some time, and the legislature did a great job of closing that $800 million budget gap that we had last year. And I'm not suggesting that there's another $800 million up there, but surely somewhere in the state budget there are additional revenues that can be saved. I'm not saying that the state has necessarily a revenue problem, but if you remember what Reagan did back in the early 80s when he dropped the top personal rate from 70% down to 28%, tax revenues actually exploded. I mean, I don't believe in the static model. I think behavior changes. I think we'll see more businesses come into the state as a fact of reducing our business profit tax and making it more competitive.
Steve Kenda is a businessman. He's considering a run to be New Hampshire's next Republican governor. His website is kenda2012.com, Kenda 2012.com. You can join the conversation if you have questions for Steve. We are here at 888-299-3151. You can call now, 888-299-3151. If New Hampshire were a business and it were for sale, would you buy it?
I'd be tempted to invest in it. There's some things that I'd like to see New Hampshire do differently. To attract more companies to the state. I think the first thing I do, and I've gone public as far as on the record, that if I get the legislature to put the right to work across my desk, it'd be the first thing I'd pass. And I know that gives us a competitive advantage relative to our neighboring states, and might not necessarily be the most appealing piece of legislation to my union constituents, but I think that's part of the issue here has to do with shared sacrifice. I mean, we all know that we've been living beyond our means, both as a country and in the state, and I wouldn't be asking any one particular group to be making sacrifice. I'm talking about shared sacrifice, whether you're rich or you're old, you're young or you're poor, you're union or you're non-union. I think what we have to do is collectively come together. We have a relatively, there's been a lot of change in the legislature here in the state, and everyone comes up with their particular agenda item with their, with one or two constituents in the air looking for their piece of legislation. We have probably close to 1,000 bills, if not more, sitting up at the House right now that need to be reviewed. You think about it, I mean, if we just got everyone's head and mind focused around the issue of jobs and the economy and just made that the priority, think of what jobs do in terms of solving the problems, whether you're a builder or a real estate broker. I mean, the number of foreclosures that we see here in the state, jobs solve a lot of these problems.
Steve Kenda is considering a run for governor on the Republican side. Our guest this morning on WNTK and WUVR. You started a small business during one of our worst recessions in New Hampshire history. We always say success leaves clues. Here we are trying to dig ourselves out of a recession nationally. We're a little bit better here in the Granite State. Give us some of those clues. What was it like at the beginning, and how did you grow that initial thought of a small business, that one-person operation, into the multi-million-dollar operation it became?
Well, it's one of the things that I admire most about New Hampshire is our legendary self-reliance. I mean, you got to remember that, struggle and challenge, I mean, that builds character, that builds integrity. So people need a challenge. I mean, you look at what's going on nationally. I mean, what's going on with the Federal Reserve in terms of just papering over the problems and, floating. I mean, we go to war now in this country, and nobody back here at home feels it. I mean, what happened to the greatest generation and their levels of shared sacrifice, the aluminum drives, the rubber drives? I mean, we're here in this country. We just spent $5 trillion over the first term of this presidency on shovel-ready jobs that apparently weren't so shovel-ready. I mean, that's close to, if not more than $16,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country. Massive amount of debt, and I don't know what we have to show for it. I mean, what you asked about starting the business, and I think it is that period of time where people struggle, where there's a challenge, and I know right now that there are people that are struggling and are challenged here in this state, and with no thanks to our federal government in terms of providing assistance, we need to take care of it for the people here in our state by the self-reliance and the independence of the people that live in this state. And we have a great history and tradition of doing that, and I'd like to see us expand on it.
Steve, we've talked about the fact that you've explored the run for governor. You have this exploratory exploratory group here. What's going to actually change your mind and just say, okay, I'm in it, and you'll stand up there and make the official announcement?
I've gotten some great feedback from the people that have been crisscrossing the state. I think the only remaining issue now is just taking a few more weeks to make sure that I have the right group of people. I have a great consulting group right now, and they're lining up people to work in a number of the staff positions out in the field and inside the campaign. And I want to make sure that once I have those people adequately in place, and we've got our programming in terms of getting our advertising and message out there and having that exactly the way that I want it, I think you'll see the formal announcement.
What are those differences between your view of New Hampshire and those of Kevin Smith and Ovid LaMontagne, who have already declared their candidacy?
Yeah, I think I'll say Kevin and Ovid are both fine people. I think Ovid's background with his legal career. I mean, I've heard our Senate President Jeb Bradley describe him as both gracious and a gentleman, and I think those are fine traits. I think to be have a legal experience is also that's great. I think Ovid would make a fine senator. I'm just not sure what we need in the corner office right now. I think maybe what you need is a little bit more of a someone who's had executive experience, who's led and run at other management levels, someone who's provided both vision and leadership to an organization and helped it grow. And Kevin's also a very good guy. I think both of them describe themselves as social conservatives, and I also feel as though I'm a social conservative. Well, I think it'd be a little bit of a challenge for me to get to the right of either of them. So, in terms of differentiation, I think it has to be around my business experience and in terms of providing both leadership and a vision for people.
Where do you stand on expanded gambling?
I have gone on the record saying that it's again, none of us want to live in Pottersville. I think we'd all like to be George Bailey living over in Bedford Falls. But the truth is, you want a governor who's both principled and at the same time pragmatic. And I think when the casinos were all sitting just out in Las Vegas, or even as far away as Atlantic City, it wasn't having quite the impact. I've never been to Mohegan's Sun or Foxwoods, but I understand the state is actually losing revenue now as a result of that. And with 40 states now legalizing gambling, we're going to have casinos down in Massachusetts, over in Maine. I think it's one thing to be principled, but if we're going to wind up with the social costs, I think we need to at least take a look at casino. I'm not saying that I'm for it or against it. Is it House Bill 593? I think that's still currently in a state of fluctuation, so I have not had a chance to fully review the legislation. It'd be imprudent for me to comment, but I think a prospective governor at least have to have a willingness to look at the issue.
And another issue that's making the light of day again is the same-sex marriage law that was signed into law by Governor Lynch a couple of years ago, but looking at repealing that again this year. It's not terribly high on the radar of most people here in the state of New Hampshire. Where do you stand on that?
What's interesting is the way the debate here, even in the nation, has had some shift. I mean, you've got to give the Democrats credit. I mean, take a look at what's going on now with this Rush Limbaugh, Miss Fluke debate, and even bringing our president into the conversation. I mean, admittedly, Rush's choice of words were probably inappropriate, but I mean, in terms of raising the issue, the Democrats have been very clever in moving the entire issue away from the economy and jobs, of which our president has done an incredibly poor job, over to social issues. You can see what's going on in our own Republican presidential primary right now, as far as the new rise of social issues. When at a time when gas prices are exploding, the job situation is a nightmare, the government is failing as far as playing venture capitalist, and here we are debating social issues. I think it's I give the Democrats credit for playing a very clever game, and what we need to do is move the debate back to jobs and the economy.
Are you satisfied with the Republican field running for president?
I think Mitt Romney can get the job done. I think you can give him all the criticism you want for being very wealthy, but I think that's just disingenuous on the part of the Democrats. I think it's part of the game of creating this divisiveness, this rich versus poor issue in the country. Abe Lincoln made it very clear: a house divided against itself cannot stand, and this president has done nothing but divide the young and the old, the rich and the poor, the union and the non-union in the country. And I think if there's one candidate that can unite us, it would be Mitt Romney.
Steve Kenda is a New Hampshire businessman, and he is considering a run for governor on the Republican side. Check out his website at kenda2012.com. We'll put the link up on our Facebook page. Steve, please come back, and we'll continue the conversation in the future. Thank you for coming into the radio station this morning. We appreciate it.
John and Jim, thank you very much.